Dr. Veltara clicked her forearms impatiently as she waited for the next patient. The medical bay of Station Asclepius was unusually quiet today, and she had been hoping for something challenging to test her skills. Ouch. When the door slid open, and two security officers wheeled in a stretcher, she barely looked up from her datapad. "What species?" she asked, in her usual bored tone, her 6 eyes still focused on the medical reports she was reviewing. "Human, doctor," replied Officer Zektar, his voice carrying a hint of uncertainty. "Mining accident on the third moon of Kepler 4b." Dr. Voltara's crystalline head snapped up, all 6 eyes now focusing on the figure lying unconscious on the biobed. She had heard about humans, of course, the new species that had recently joined the Galactic Medical Union, but she had never actually treated one. She approached the bed slowly, her tall, elegant frame moving with practiced efficiency. The creature before her was so ordinary: brown hair, pale skin that looked thinner than paper, and a face that seemed almost childlike in its simplicity. She activated her medical scanner and began her examination. "Fascinating," she murmured, though her tone suggested anything but fascination. "Look at this primitive cardiovascular system. Only one heart. One. How does this species survive with such limited circulation?" Her assistant, a young Catherian named Zone, leaned closer to observe. "Doctor, should I prepare the standard trauma protocols?" "Of course," Dr. Veltara replied, her scanner beeping as it analyzed the human's respiratory system. "Though I suspect this will be a very simple case. Look at these lungs. They require constant atmospheric intake. No storage capacity, no backup systems. How inefficient." She moved her scanner down to examine the human's skeletal structure. Kim Dae-ho, according to his identification chip, was a mining engineer who had been caught in a tunnel collapse. The injuries were typical for such accidents: broken ribs, internal bleeding, head trauma. Nothing that couldn't be handled with standard medical procedures. "The bone density is remarkably low," she observed, making notes on her pad. "And this muscular system, so much redundancy. Nature clearly hasn't optimized this species very well, Doctor." Veltara had treated over 200 different species during her career. She had saved the lives of gas-breathing Altarians, silicon-based crystallines, and even the notoriously difficult-to-treat plasma wraiths. Humans, she decided, would be refreshingly simple. "The dermal layer is incredibly thin," she continued, gently lifting the human's arm to examine a cut. "I've seen flower petals with more protection. Look at this. The blood is iron-based. How primitive. Most advanced species evolved past metal-based circulation systems millennia ago." Her scanner revealed more details about the human's condition. Multiple fractures, significant blood loss, and what appeared to be a mild concussion. Standard injuries that would respond well to universal healing treatments. Dr. Zone ventured, "I've heard that humans have some unique biological characteristics. Perhaps we should consult their medical database." Dr. Veltara waved too, of her arms dismissively. "Unnecessary. Biology follows universal principles. This creature has simple injuries requiring simple treatments. Besides, what could a species this young possibly teach us about medicine?" She began preparing the standard trauma medications, universal healing compounds, that worked on virtually every known species, neural suppressants to prevent pain, and cellular regeneration boosters to speed recovery. The same treatments she had used successfully thousands of times. "Administer healing compound 7-alpha, she ordered, watching as the medication flowed into the human's bloodstream through an IV drip, "and prepare neural suppressant 12-beta. This patient should be conscious and mobile within 6 standard hours." As she worked, Dr. Veltara couldn't help but feel slightly disappointed. She had hoped for something more challenging. The human's body seemed so straightforward, so predictable. Where other species had evolved complex adaptations and sophisticated biological systems, humans appeared to have remained stuck in an earlier evolutionary phase. "The brain structure is particularly simple," she noted, running her scanner across Kim Dae-ho's skull. "Single hemisphere processing, no backup consciousness systems, no enhanced memory storage. It's almost like they're still using the original biological template." She programmed the autodoc to monitor the human's vital signs and began preparing. Her preliminary report would be an easy case study to add to her collection, a perfect example of how proper medical knowledge could easily treat even the most primitive species. I estimate full recovery within 12 hours, she told Zone confidently. Humans may be evolutionary laggards, but they're simple enough to treat effectively. In fact, I might write a paper on this, something about the medical treatment of underdeveloped species. The human's breathing was steady, his heart rate stable. Everything looked perfectly normal according to her instruments. Dr. Valtara was already thinking about her next patient when she noticed something odd on the monitor. The human's cellular activity was fluctuating in an unusual pattern. Not dangerous, just ... different. She made a note to check on it later, but wasn't particularly concerned. After all, how complicated could treating a human possibly be? 3 days had passed since Kim Dae-ho arrived at the medical station, and Dr. Valtara was no longer feeling confident. She stood in front of the bio-bed, her 6 eyes studying the readouts with growing concern. The human's condition had not improved. In fact, it seemed to be getting worse. His temperature is rising again, Zoln reported, checking the vital signs display, and his blood pressure is becoming unstable. Dr. Valtera clicked her mandibles in frustration. The universal healing compounds that worked perfectly on every other species were having no effect on the human. Worse, Kim Dae-ho's body seemed to be rejecting the treatments entirely. Increase the healing compound dosage, she ordered, though doubt crept into her voice, and add immune system suppressants. Perhaps his body is fighting the medicine. She had never encountered anything like this before. Humans' wounds were healing at an impossibly slow rate compared to other species. What should have been minor injuries were persisting for days. The broken ribs should have mended completely by now, but they showed barely any improvement, Dr. Zone said quietly. The other medical staff are starting to talk. They're wondering why you can't treat a simple human injury. Dr. Valtara's crystalline skin darkened with embarrassment. She was known throughout the medical station as the doctor who could treat anything. She had saved dying Altarians when their breathing apparatus failed. She had performed emergency surgery on a crystalline whose silicon matrix was cracking. But a simple human mining accident was defeating her. Run another full-body scan, she commanded, her voice sharper than usual. I want to see exactly what's happening inside this primitive creature. The medical scanner hummed as it passed over Kim Dae-ho's unconscious form. The results appeared on the holographic display, and Dr. Valtara studied them carefully. Everything looked normal according to her understanding of basic biology. The human had the expected organs in the expected places, functioning at expected levels. But something was wrong. The healing compounds were being filtered out of his system almost immediately. Neural suppressants were causing strange reactions in his brain chemistry. Even the simple IV fluids were being processed in ways she didn't understand. Try the Andromedon healing protocol, she decided. If the standard treatments aren't working, we'll use something stronger. Zolin prepared the more powerful medications. With visible reluctance, Doctor, are you sure? These treatments are quite harsh. They're designed for species with much more robust biological systems. This human is clearly more primitive than I initially thought, Dr. Valtara replied, though her confidence was wavering. His body probably needs stronger medicine to respond properly. She administered the Andromedan protocol, watching the monitors carefully. For a moment, it seemed like the human's condition might improve. His vital signs stabilized, and his brain activity increased slightly. But then, just as quickly, everything went wrong. Kim Dae-ho's body began shaking violently. Alarms sounded throughout the medical bay as his heart rate spiked dangerously high. His temperature soared, and his blood pressure readings became erratic. Emergency protocols, Dr. Valtara shouted, her 4 arms working frantically to stabilize the human. Flush his system and prepare the crash cart. It took nearly an hour to get Kim Dae-ho's condition under control. When the crisis finally passed, he was in worse shape than when he had arrived. Dr. Valtara stood beside the bio-bed, her hands trembling with a mixture of fear and confusion. What's wrong with this species? She whispered to herself. Why won't they respond to proper medical treatment? Word of her difficulties had spread throughout the station. Other doctors began offering suggestions, but none of them had ever treated a human either. The few medical texts available about humans were basic and incomplete, focusing more on their psychology and culture than their biology. Perhaps Zolan suggested carefully, we should try a different approach. Maybe human biology works differently than we assumed. Dr. Veltora bristled at the suggestion. Biology is biology. They're your universal principles that apply to all life forms. This human is simply more primitive than most species, which makes him harder to treat. But privately, she was beginning to doubt herself. She had tried every standard treatment in her arsenal, and nothing worked. The human's body seemed to have its own agenda, fighting every attempt to help it heal. On comprehensive biological tests, she ordered finally. I want to understand exactly what makes this species so medically resistant. Maybe if I can document their biological weaknesses, I can develop new treatment protocols. She began preparing for extensive testing. Blood samples, tissue analysis, cellular studies, genetic mapping, everything she could think of to understand human biology. She would prove that humans were simply an inferior species that required special treatment for their primitive biological systems. I'll write a research paper, she decided aloud. Something about the evolutionary failures of human physiology. It will explain why this species is so difficult to treat medically. As she worked late into the night, preparing test protocols and research outlines, Dr. Veltara felt her reputation slipping away. The brilliant doctor who could heal anyone was being defeated by an unconscious human mining engineer. But she was determined to solve this puzzle, even if it meant proving that humans were the most medically primitive species in the galaxy. She had no idea that her tests would reveal something completely different. The test results arrived during the night shift, when the medical bay was quiet except for the soft hum of machines. Dr. Veltara was alone, reviewing patient files when her computer chimed with an incoming data packet. She expected to find confirmation of everything she believed about human biological inferiority. Instead, she found something that made her question everything she knew about medicine. Her 6 eyes widened as she stared at the holographic display. The numbers couldn't be right. She ran the data through her systems 3 times, but the results remained the same. Kim Dae-ho's biological scan revealed not a primitive creature, but something that defied every principle of evolutionary biology she had ever learned. This is impossible, she whispered, her voice barely audible in the empty medical bay. The human's cardiovascular system, which she had dismissed as simple and inefficient, was actually a masterpiece of biological engineering. Yes, he had only one primary heart, but the scan revealed secondary pumping mechanisms throughout his body, tiny muscle groups that could maintain blood flow even if the main heart was severely damaged. His circulation system had more backup plans than a military operation. Dr. Veltara scrolled through the respiratory data, her hands trembling. The human's lungs weren't just simple air processors. They contained emergency oxygen storage cells that could function in environments that would kill most species instantly. His blood could carry oxygen so efficiently that he could survive in atmospheric conditions that would suffocate her entire species. But it was the immune system data that truly shocked her. The reason her treatments had failed wasn't because humans were primitive. It was because they were too advanced. Kim Dae-ho's immune system was like a biological weapon that treated any foreign substance as a potential invasion. The healing compounds she had used were being attacked and destroyed before they could help. No wonder he rejected the treatments. She realized, her voice filled with awe. His body was protecting itself from what it saw as poison. She pulled up the skeletal analysis, expecting to find confirmation of human weakness. Instead, she discovered that human bones were stronger than Catherian crystal matrices. The low bone density she had observed was actually a sophisticated balance between strength and flexibility. Human bones could bend without breaking, absorb massive impacts, and repair themselves in ways that her own species rigid. Crystal bones never could. The muscular system data was equally stunning. What she had called wasteful redundancy was, actually, an incredibly complex damage control system. If one muscle group was injured, others could immediately compensate. Humans could lose entire limbs and still function. Their bodies were built like military vehicles, with multiple backup systems for every important function. Dr. Veltara's hands shook as she opened the neural analysis files. The human brain, which she had dismissed as simple and single hemisphere, was actually processing information in ways that amazed her. The pain tolerance readings were off the charts. Kim Dae-ho had been conscious and aware throughout procedures that should have left him in a coma. He felt everything, she whispered in horror. Every test, every treatment, every mistake I made. And he never complained. She discovered that humans routinely survive trauma that would kill dozens of other species. Their bodies were designed to keep functioning under conditions that would shut down more advanced biological systems. They could lose blood, suffer broken bones, endure radiation, still remain conscious and active. The genetic analysis revealed the most shocking truth of all. Humans hadn't evolved on a peaceful world like most species. They had developed on a planet so dangerous that only the most resilient creatures could survive. Every system in their bodies was designed for survival in conditions that would be considered hellish by galactic standards. They're not primitive, Dr. Veltara realized, her voice filled with wonder and terror. They're over-engineered for survival. She pulled up comparative data from other species and felt her confidence crumble completely. Humans could survive radiation levels that had sterilized entire Catherian colonies. They could function in temperatures that would kill most life forms. Their immune systems were so aggressive that they could fight off diseases that had wiped out entire civilizations. The mining accident that had brought Kim Dae-ho to her station would have instantly killed a dozen members of her own species. The human had not only survived it, but had walked to the rescue shuttle under his own power. He had only lost consciousness when his body decided it was safe to do so. Dr. Veltara sat back in her chair, overwhelmed by the implications. Everything she thought she knew about human biology was wrong. They weren't failed evolutionary experiments. They were the most successful survivors in the galaxy. Their bodies were built like living tanks, designed to keep going no matter what. The universe threw at them. She looked at Kim Dae-ho's sleeping form with new respect. This wasn't a primitive creature that needed her help. This was a member of a species so tough that they colonized worlds other species considered uninhabitable. They didn't avoid dangerous planets. They actively sought them out because danger was their natural environment. I've been trying to fix something that wasn't broken, she whispered. I've been treating a biological masterpiece like it was a broken machine. The truth hit her like a physical blow. She hadn't been treating a patient. With a healing process far more sophisticated than anything in her medical arsenal, Dr. Veltara spent the next several days diving deep into human medical databases. And each new discovery made her feel smaller and more foolish. She had requested access to the complete human medical archive, claiming it was for research purposes. The truth was, she needed to understand just how badly she had misjudged this species. The first file she opened was a collection of human medical case studies. She expected to find examples of typical injuries and treatments. Instead, she found stories that seemed impossible. A human female named Lee Min-young had survived a spacecraft explosion that killed everyone else on board. She had been found 3 days later, still conscious, with injuries that should have killed her within minutes. This cannot be real, Dr. Veltara muttered. But the medical records were verified and authenticated. She read about a human male named Park Jae-sung, who had performed surgery on himself during a polar expedition, when his appendix had burst. He had removed it himself using basic tools, then walked 15 miles to reach help. He had been conscious throughout the entire procedure, guiding others through radio communication. The more she read, the more horrified she became. Humans regularly survived things that would end entire civilizations. There were records of humans who had been exposed to radiation levels that would sterilize Catherian colonies, yet they had lived for decades afterward. Some had even continued working in dangerous environments, as if massive radiation exposure was just another day at the office. Zone, she called to her assistant, who had been quietly observing her research. Look at this file, this human. Female delivered her own baby during a spacecraft emergency, then piloted the vessel to safety with internal injuries that would have killed me instantly. Zone examined the medical report with wide eyes. Doctor, it says here that she was bleeding internally for 6 hours, yet remained conscious and alert the entire time. How is this possible? Dr. Veltara had no answer. She continued reading, finding case after case of impossible human survival. There were soldiers who had continued fighting with severed limbs, explorers who had survived in space without protective suits, and accident victims who had walked away from crashes that should have left nothing but dust. One particular file made her hands tremble as she read it. A human construction worker named Kim Soon-jo had fallen from a building and landed on concrete. His injuries included multiple broken bones, internal bleeding, and severe head trauma, according to the medical report. He had stood up after the fall, walked to the nearest medical facility, and only collapsed when doctors assured him he was safe. They don't just survive, Dr. Veltara realized. They remain functional even when their bodies are severely damaged. She discovered that humans had developed medical techniques that seemed brutal by galactic standards, but were incredibly effective. They would cut open their own bodies to repair damage, use electrical shocks to restart hearts, and even replace entire organs with mechanical devices. What other species considered barbaric, humans saw as routine medical care. The psychological reports were equally stunning. Humans didn't just endure physical trauma, they thrived on it. They actively sought out dangerous situations, challenging environments, and deadly worlds to colonize. Pain and hardship made them stronger, not weaker. Look at this, she showed. Zone, another file. This human settlement chose to build their colony on a world with active volcanoes, toxic atmosphere, and deadly storms. When asked why, they said it would be fun and challenging. Dr. Veltara began to understand why humans were the only species that actively colonized death worlds. They weren't brave or foolish, they were biologically designed to consider uninhabitable conditions as merely interesting challenges. What killed other species was just another day for humans. She found military records that made her question everything she knew about survival. Human soldiers would continue fighting even after losing limbs. They would carry wounded comrades for miles through hostile territory. They would sacrifice themselves to save others without hesitation, as if their own survival was less important than completing their mission. The medical research files revealed the most humbling truth of all. Humans had developed treatments for diseases that had wiped out entire alien civilizations. They had created vaccines, surgical techniques, and medical equipment that far exceeded anything the galactic medical community had achieved. Yet they had shared all of this knowledge freely with other species. They're not primitive, Dr. Veltara whispered to herself. They're the most medically advanced species in the galaxy, and they've been helping us all along. She realized that the mining accident that had brought Kim Dae-ho to her station was considered minor by human standards. What she had seen as life-threatening injuries were things that humans routinely walked off. The tunnel collapse that would have killed dozens of her own species was just another workplace accident to humans. Dr. Veltara pulled up Kim Dae-ho's current medical readings. Now that she understood what she was looking at, she could see that his body was healing itself with incredible efficiency. His broken bones were mending, his internal bleeding had stopped, and his brain function was returning to normal. Without any help from her treatments? I haven't been treating him, she realized with growing shame. I've been interfering with a healing process that's far more advanced than anything I could provide. The human body wasn't a machine that needed fixing. It was a biological miracle that knew exactly how to repair itself. When Kim Dae-ho finally opened his eyes on the 7th day, Dr. Veltara was sitting beside his bed with a translator device. In her hands, she had spent the past 2 days learning basic Korean phrases, something she had never done for any other species. Her pride had been completely shattered, replaced by something she had rarely felt in her long medical career. Genuine respect, she said carefully, her pronunciation awkward but sincere. I am very sorry. Kim Dae-ho blinked slowly, his dark eyes focusing on her crystalline features. A small smile appeared on his face, the kind of expression that Dr. Veltara now realized contained more complexity than she had ever understood. Hello, doctor. You learned Korean for me? I learned many things, she replied, switching back to her translator. Most importantly, I learned that I nearly killed you with my ignorance. The human tried to sit up, wincing slightly as his healing. Ribs protested. Dr. Veltara moved to help him, but he waved her away gently. I'm fine, Doc. Just need to take it slow. You didn't nearly kill me, though. I'm pretty hard to kill. That simple statement, delivered with casual humor, summarized everything Dr. Veltara had learned about humans over the past week. They didn't boast about their incredible resilience because to them, it was just normal. Surviving things that would destroy other species was simply part of being human. I have read your medical histories, she said, her voice filled with wonder. Your species has survived things that ended entire civilizations. Performed surgery on yourselves, you fight with broken bones, you walk away from accidents that should leave nothing but dust. Kim Dae-ho chuckled, a sound that somehow conveyed both pain and unbreakable spirit. We do what we have to do, always have. Earth wasn't exactly a gentle place to grow up. Dr. Voltara had researched Earth after reading the medical files. The human homeworld was a nightmare of natural disasters, deadly weather, dangerous animals, and toxic environments. Most species would have died out quickly on such a hostile planet. Humans had not only survived, but thrived, developing technology and civilization while constantly fighting for their lives. Your planet tried to kill you for millions of years, she observed, so you became impossible to kill. Something like that, Kim Dae-ho agreed. Though we prefer to think of it as becoming really good at not dying, it's more optimistic. Even now, facing a doctor who had nearly poisoned him with inappropriate treatments, the human showed no anger or resentment. He made jokes about his own near-death experience. Dr. Veltara had treated thousands of patients, but she had never encountered such grace under pressure. I want to learn from you, she said suddenly. From your people. I have spent my career thinking I understood biology, but I know nothing about real medicine. Kim Dae-ho looked surprised. Doc, you're one of the best doctors in the galaxy. Everyone knows that. You just hadn't treated a human before. I'm one of the most arrogant doctors in the galaxy, she corrected. I assumed your species was primitive because I didn't understand how advanced you really are. Your body has been healing itself perfectly while I kept interfering with treatments that were completely wrong. She pulled up his current medical readings on a portable display. Look at this. Your bones are mending faster than our best regeneration technology. Your immune system has cleared every toxin I accidentally gave you. Your brain function is returning to normal despite trauma that would leave most species permanently damaged. Kim Dae-ho studied the readings with interest. Looks about right, though I think I'll need a few more days before I'm ready to go back to work. Can't have me falling into any more tunnels. You're joking about nearly dying, Dr. Veltara said, shaking her head in amazement. It's what we do, Kim Dae-ho replied with a shrug. If you can't laugh at almost dying, what can you laugh at? Dr. Veltara had already begun collaborating with human medical teams throughout the galaxy. She was learning that human medicine was based on a simple but profound principle. The human body was incredibly good at healing itself. If you just gave it the right conditions and stayed out of its way. I am writing a new research paper, she told him. It will be called Human Biology, a masterclass in evolutionary excellence. It will explain to the medical community that humans are not primitive creatures, but the most successful survivors in the galaxy. That's nice of you, Doc, but you don't need to do that for us. I am not doing it for you, Dr. Veltara replied. I am doing it for every other doctor who might make the same mistakes I did. And I am doing it for myself, because I never want to be that arrogant again. Kim Dae-ho smiled that complex human smile again. Well, when you put it that way, I think it's a great idea. As Dr. Veltara watched him slowly stand and take a few careful steps around the medical bay, she made herself a promise. She would never again mistake unfamiliarity for inferiority. The universe was full of incredible adaptations and amazing survival strategies. Humans had just taught her that sometimes the greatest strength looked like weakness until you understood what you were really seeing. The human body wasn't just a biological system. It was a masterpiece of survival engineering, refined by millions of years of refusing to give up.